Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte, and today I have a special guest. I'm super, super excited. Diane Stockwell was my very first editor. She took a chance on a newbie writer, and that's why I've had the career that I've had. So I am immensely grateful to her for taking a chance on me, giving me the opportunity. And so it's an amazing pleasure for me to interview her today and to introduce you to her. So Diane, if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you got into editing.
Hi, first of all, it is so great to see you. I haven't seen you in years since we had that imprint many years ago at Kensington, and I'm so happy to reconnect. This is wonderful. And just to tell your viewers a little bit, I started in publishing as an editorial assistant at a Big Five publisher, Warner Books, which is now Hachette. And then moved on to Kensington, where I worked with you and some wonderful writers that I was lucky enough to work with on almost all of them, their first published books. Linda Sandoval, Caridad Scordado, and others, Berta Platas, great, wonderful group. And then from there, I went into a bunch of more entrepreneurial ventures. I started my own publishing company, publishing bilingual children's books with read-along audio CDs. I started my own literary agency, and I've been doing that for many years. I started translating books from Spanish into English, which I still do, and more recently working as a freelance editor, working with writers on projects that they intend to shop to publishers or publish themselves. So I'm doing still a mix of publishing related activities.
Okay, very good, very good. How does how do you feel the difference between working for a publishing house and then doing this freelance on your own? How is that, like on your day-to-day basis, how is that different?
Well, I guess it's a little bit hard to answer that now because of the times that we're in with the pandemic. so for the past almost year, it's been, and everyone's lives have been sort of thrown upside down.
Yes.
So, in the before times, I'm trying to remember the before times. You have to be just very self-motivated and self-directed. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, being self-employed as compared to going to work for an employer, where you have a much more, prescribed tasks that you need to do, and there's certain schedules that you need to adhere to, and you have some oversight by somebody else. But here, you're your own oversight, you're your own boss. And I think you understand that also as a writer, you're your own boss. So it's parallels there.
Well, I imagine now you get also the opportunity to choose the projects you want to work on, right? I don't know how much you get to do that at a publishing house. Do you get to? I mean, I know you get to choose the books that you want to edit, that you want to the authors you want to take on, but
right. Well, that's not always true. I mean, publishers acquire books by committee, which means, so they have a weekly editorial meeting. And that's where all of the editors come together, the editorial director, and usually the publisher is not there, who's more overseeing. And you have a publicity representative, somebody from marketing and sales are also attending those meetings and weighing in. And so then you go around the table, each editor has a little stack, or when I was doing, this was years ago, we had little paper stacks, but now I imagine people bring their laptops or what have you. And you pitch to the group the projects that you want to acquire. And that means that you want to make an offer on the books to the agent that representing those projects. And then you'll either get volunteers to read the material, say, yeah, that sounds great, I'd love to read it. And you'll have a bunch of people that'll read it over the next week, and then you'll discuss it again. Or it'll be a thumbs down. If people say, no, I really don't see this, that has the X, Y, and Z against it, it's not going to be, we have another title that already covered that ground, or there's just not, this is not a strong category. It's not something which, so you do not get to just acquire whatever you want as an editor. But if you do get to the next stage, that people are supportive of the project, you have a bunch of yes votes from fellow editors and perhaps publicity or salesperson that might have read the project as well, then you do, is this too much detail, by the way?
No, it's actually, that's wonderful. Yeah, no, because
Okay.
I think a lot of new writers really don't know what the process is, and they don't know, why they're getting rejected. They don't know the process. So no, that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yes, so for I will direct this to the writers for the behind the scenes look, behind the curtain here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
after you have some people on your team that are supportive of the project, you have a green light to try to acquire it. Then the next thing you usually have to do, not always, is to come up with a P&L, a profit and loss statement. And they have, programs that you can guess how many copies would I get out the door? What format would we do this? Would it be a paperback? Would it be a hardcover? What would the price point be if we can, sell 10,000 copies? If we get, 30% returns, what's the net sales?
Yeah, yeah.
And what can the advance offer be? What kind of advance to the author can we expect to recoup? What would and that is but that can also go completely out the window if the publisher and the higher ups
Yeah.
are very enthused. They might just say offer $500,000 or whatever, and there's no
Wow.
math to that.
Yeah.
If you have
I haven't had that experience yet.
it's rare, but
yeah, not a Hollywood celebrities.
and then you make an offer. You call the agent up, or they might have an auction date set, so that from the agent end of things, if they have a lot of interest from various publishers, they could say, okay, we're going to auction this in 2 weeks. Here's the date. Here are the rules of the auction. And then on that date, the editor from the various publishers will come in with their bid. So one of them might bid $10,000 advance for world rights or for US rights or whatever it is that they want to acquire the rights for, the territories, the languages. And then the agent will compare those offers and, accept the best one. Or sometimes if you're the only person that often it'll just, you'll just say, I love this, I want to make an offer. And the agent will say, great. And you'll agree to terms and that's it. And sometimes if an agent has a really good relationship with a particular publisher, or they know this author would be perfect for this editor in this house, this is my dream scenario, I don't even want anyone else to look at it, then they'll submit it on an exclusive basis to one editor. And they'll have a certain window of time, like you get this for a week or you get this for 2 weeks. And then I'm going to submit it widely, but I'm going to give you this chance because I really wanted to be with you. So that's another way that books are acquired.
Yeah. Does that happen often where the agent will say, no, this is the editor that I really, really want? You have those 2 weeks?
Yes. I think that happens it's not unusual, certainly.
Okay.
It's not an unusual scenario. And then a lot of times if you've already been published, usually in the contract there's some kind of option clause, which means that you have to submit your next work to that publisher and give them a certain amount of time to consider it. And generally, you have to be very careful with those option clauses, because if you don't know what you're doing, this is why it's important. If you don't have an agent to at least do your homework, they could tie you up forever with the same terms.
Yes. I had that experience. I actually, at the beginning, I was very excited. It's like, wow, I forget what Kensington gave me. I don't know if it was a 2 or I think it was a 4-book contract. I don't remember, but then you do have to be careful. At first, you're very excited, like, wow, I get to, write for this. I'm guaranteed, book sales. But then you're exactly right. You're getting tied down to that publishing house for 2-3 years at that price that you were a new writer, so you're not going to get the best offer at the beginning. So sometimes it's not that great, I think.
Right. And I would certainly, I would advise anybody that has a publishing offer to to join the Authors Guild if they can, because that's an organization that all published writers, it's only published writers can be members of, and they can ask each other for advice. They have these forums, and also they have a legal department that'll vet your contract. So
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, you were telling me
yeah.
about that, so I'm going to be looking into that myself. I always relied on RWA, but that's yeah. RWA hasn't. They don't do a lot of that. I don't think they don't look at contracts. They just kind of give you information on the industry in the publishing area. So
Well, and the Authors Guild will send you their guide to contracts, which has
yeah, that's awesome.
Sample. This is the clause, and this is what we recommend, or at least don't do this, and that's really valuable to have.
That is. So then as an independent or freelance editor, then how do you choose your projects? So now you have complete control of what you decide to edit. So how do you choose? Is there a favorite or I guess a genre that you like best, or how do you choose your projects?
Well, I as an editor, I've generally worked, I've worked on a lot of nonfiction, and as an agent, I've represented journalists and just people writing nonfiction, and that's something I tend to gravitate to. And also, when I was working in publishing, I did a lot of like prescriptive nonfiction, so I'm comfortable with that, like self-help or diet or nutrition or that kind of thing. Memoirs, I've done a lot as a freelancer. I've worked on a lot of memoirs that have been self-published mainly, and that I really enjoy, because I just as a reader, that's something that I gravitate to. That's probably my favorite. Right now I'm reading Willie Nelson's memoir. It's a long story. For example, that's what, and I just love getting into people's stories and their lives, and it's just fascinating terrain for me. So and I like to work with writers that do need a little help. I want to be able to contribute something, but not so much that they don't know what they're, if they're really at a level that they can barely write, I would probably step aside and say, look, this isn't for me. But I'm fine working with writers that have a wonderful story to tell, but just might need a little finesse with the mechanics of sentence structure, or just to make it a little more readable, a little more accessible. And in my case, I've done a lot of translations, which is kind of a separate area, but it's very related to the line editing aspect of it. Because when you're translating something from, in my case, Spanish, you're just trying to make it the same thought, but in English, and in the best, just say it in the most straightforward way possible. Usually I've mostly done translations of by journalists, that it's very like straightforward reporting. You want to make it kind of simple but powerful. Yeah. And I found that working on as an editor, a line editor, for some of these nonfiction manuscripts I've worked on, it's a very similar process to me. You're just trying to make it, okay, this sentence, I know what she's trying to say, but it's a little clunky. How about we use this word instead? And maybe we don't need these two descriptors, and just to, so I enjoy that. I enjoy the kind of the challenge of just making something really kind of streamlining the prose. You want to just use as many words as you need and not any more. And right. So I think that's kind of fun for me.
Yeah. Now, what is the difference, for people that don't know, the difference between a line editor and a developmental editor?
Well, a developmental editor will look at the entire manuscript and take a look and say, well, and just give you more sort of big picture advice. Like, okay, you don't need this section, maybe you should go earlier, and you really don't need all of this backstory, just giving advice on the big picture. And so a line editor is the nitty gritty, nuts and bolts, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph.
So if you're a new writer, do you feel you need both? Do you need a developmental editor first, and then just to make sure that there's that flow in there, and then afterwards you look more at a line editor to make sure that your language is, like, I know for me, I've been speaking English my whole life, but my first language was Spanish. And every once in a while I catch myself writing something that just doesn't make sense, or it's nice
Yeah.
to have, I think, somebody line edit your work. But do you recommend both, or because it can be pricey too, and I know if you're a new writer, but what kind of gets me sometimes is that new writers will spend a ton of money on covers and not on the editing. It's like, it doesn't make sense, you need a nice
Right.
cover, but you also need, when somebody opens your book, if they're finding all kinds of errors or mistakes, or it just doesn't flow well, they're not going to ever buy any of your books again, no matter how pretty your cover is.
Right. Well, that's a very personal choice, but I think if it somewhat depends on the genre. Like if you're a fiction writer, if you're nonfiction, there are kind of different things to consider. But
Yeah.
um, if you're very comfortable with your story, it's what you want to tell, and you don't necessarily need a developmental editor.
Okay.
I don't think so. If this is the story that I want, because I would, if you're going to spend some money. I mean, self-publishing your book can be an expensive endeavor.
Yeah.
And you want to put the money towards where it's going to have the biggest effect, the most positive impact. And I think line editing and proofreading for sure, you need to have somebody proofread your book. And copy editing and line editing, I use those terms a little bit interchangeably, but line editing can be more comprehensive than copy editing is. But I generally kind of do both at the same time. And sometimes people hire me to do copy edit and a proofread, and that's then I'll just do that at the same time. I'm reading it very closely, just making little changes throughout. But the more pair of eyes that you can go over your book, the better.
Yeah. And how closely then do you work? So once you turn in, they give you the project, you read it, you make all your corrections, and you send it back. Is there a second pass through, or would that, how does it typically work with a?
No, I mean, for me, no, that's
No.
back to you. Do whatever you want with it. If you want me to read it again, you could hire me to proofread it again. But at some point, it's a work for hire service. So it's that's how I approach it. Yes, I will go through it and do it. It's done. And all of my changes are suggestions. It's your book. You can change whatever you like back. So, but this is what I would recommend. Here you go. And then you're off and running.
Okay. If a writer has a question though, that they're unsure, like why are you changing this, or why do you recommend this? Do you have any kind of feedback in that, that way?
I mean, I would be happy that's never really come up, but I would
No?
sure
Okay.
be happy to answer a question. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, some people suggest that, or I've read, just looking at companies that provide the service, like we'll line edit your book and we'll tell you exactly why we're making every single change. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you why I'm making every single change. That would take forever. And no.
Yeah. I can imagine that would take a long time.
Yeah, that seems silly.
And I think you're right. Ultimately, it's up to the writer. I've had people change just cultural stuff in Spanish, and so I usually ignore that. even working for a traditional publisher, publishing house, I'll look at that and say, well, no, I meant to say this, and that's obviously it just, the translation didn't go through or whatever. But
is it because it was a Spanish word you put in, or
or just a cultural way of handling something that the editor said it didn't, like it makes the character sound weak because the character wouldn't speak this way, or wouldn't allow the grandma to speak to her that way. And it's like, well, yeah, they would, because it's just in our culture, that's the way we
have you met my
I don't
grandma?
question. I don't question. Or if I do question, I don't say anything. I don't outright tell. Like, well, my grandmother unfortunately is no longer alive, but no matter what she said, or even my mom, if she says something, it's like, yeah, okay, mom, and she'll argue. She'll make her point, and she'll keep talking, and it's like, I understand. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I should do this with my kids. I mean, this happened all the time when my kids were little, right? Like it's 80 degrees in California, and we're going out to dinner, and my mom wants jackets on the kids. They're gonna catch a cold. I know, Mom. Okay, we'll put the jacket on for a few minutes, and the kids are like, "No, just for a minute, so Grandma doesn't get upset."
Yeah.
But
Make Grandma
anyways, yeah,
happy.
that's, I think sometimes when you are, when you're with a writer, you just, you might not have, you might not be able to do this with a traditional publisher, but I think if you're self-publishing, it is your book. You can accept the changes or not accept the changes.
Well, even with a traditional publisher, you get the copy edited manuscript back.
Yeah,
Then you go through it and accept the changes or not.
yeah,
You can stet the changes or but usually in the contract there's something that says the publisher has the final say. But they usually, I mean, the editors, of course, they want the authors to be happy with their book. It's their
right,
book, and they
right.
will not, they'll be reasonable about if this is really important to you, then sure. I mean,
Yeah,
unless they really think it's going to make the book that much worse. But that's, usually authors and editors work really nicely together, and there's a
yeah, yeah,
give and take there,
right.
and the editors want you to be happy with it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know if you said in the beginning where so where do people find you?
Well, I have many various websites that I'm on. Uh, my I have an editing platform page on Readsy. So that's one. People can just go and hire me there. People could email me, Diane
Okay. So you
Stockwell at
accept emails from,
Gmail. That's probably the easiest way, 'cause
oh, okay,
that's
okay.
not going to change. Yeah. Yeah. Diane.stockwell@gmail.
Okay, I'll
But
post that. I'll post that so
you
that
don't need the dot. I've found that out
really?
years later. Yeah, like either way, but it does,
Oh,
technically it has the dot in there.
okay.
Um, and I also work with the editorial department, which is a company that has a bunch of editors on staff that work specialized in various things. So people could contact me there, or just directly.
Okay, okay. Um, Something else that I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the translation that you talked about. So when you were translating, you're obviously translating from Spanish to English, right?
Yes.
When you're doing the translating, how do you try to maintain the voice of the author? Is that something that's hard to do?
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, but also I sort of know what I'm best at in terms of like I don't really do literary translations. I mostly have done I've done some sort of mass market fiction, which is fun, but
Okay.
it's sort of middle brow, but nothing too um, literary. Uh, so and I've done a lot or several works of like long form journalism, and that's like the my most recent book just came out, Killing the Story: Journalists Risking Their Lives to Uncover the Truth in Mexico, by Timoris Greco. And it's about journalists getting threatened and killed in
Mm,
Mexico. And in fact, Timoris was just quoted in a piece about that in the New York Times today. They mentioned the book.
wow.
So nice.
Oh,
So in a book like that, you're just, I mean, the prose in the first
yeah.
place, in the source material is just very straightforward. It's journalistic, and yeah, you are trying to capture that voice, but it's generally very, it's not too literary or flowery
Right,
or
right. Yeah,
so
yeah. The nonfiction is, I think, is I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm thinking it must be easier because you don't have that voice that you have in novels that,
right.
distinguish one author from another as much.
Yes, I think that, yeah. So I stick to I think that what I do best, and that's generally more of a journalistic kind of works.
Yeah, okay. So what else have you worked on? So that was one of them.
As far as translations,
Or, and just anything recently. What are some of the books that you've worked on?
well, one really interesting project I worked on over the summer was a memoir. She had co-writer. And it was called Walking the Thin Black Line. And it was written by Melissa McFadden, who was a lieutenant in the Columbus, Ohio Police Department. She's African-American, and it was a memoir about all of the discrimination that she faced over the years, over a 20-year career in that particular department. And it was very timely, coming out right now, just in the wake of the George Floyd protests and Black Lives Matter. And she wrote such a powerful story, and everybody should read it. Walking the Thin Black Line, available on Amazon. And one interesting thing about that was when it first came out on Amazon, there were a couple of reviews that were like 0 stars and this is horrible and blah, blah, blah. And they were kind of obviously by disgruntled,
Yes.
cops in
Yes.
the department.
Yes.
And in the book, she even had some screenshots of some Facebook groups, just unbelievably racist,
Wow.
bigoted
Wow.
comments, and today, these private groups. And then after a week or so, then the reviews of real readers started coming in, like 5 stars, 5 stars. Now she's got like 75-star reviews of people that have actually read the book.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. That's great.
That was really rewarding to work on that one. And she's amazing. She had been fighting discrimination pretty vocally almost since the beginning, and that didn't go over well. Like, she had come out of her career in the military, so she expected the police. She'd been in the military like 5 years or something, so she expected the police department to adhere to the same norms of decency and everything. Like, nope, that's totally different. And another book that I worked on just very recently that I really enjoyed was a memoir. It's a very different kind of book by Crystal Kenny called Paris, A Life Less Ordinary. And she had her plan from the beginning was to just self-publish her story. And she did not, as far as I know, hire a developmental editor. She wrote this book, and then she sent it to me to edit, and she asked me for some global advice, but just minimal. And it was so much fun. It was exactly the kind of book that I would want to read. And I was able to help her, I think, make it better, just working on very nuts and bolts stuff with her prose. And she had gone to Paris as a nanny. She'd gone there in high school for like a trip, and was like, oh, someday I really want to live here. And to make that dream come true, she applied to be an au pair for this family with 4 kids, which was insane. And she didn't even speak French. And then she went on to like launch a career as a photographer and taking pictures of people near the Eiffel Tower. And anyway, it was just a lot of fun to work on that. She has a great story. So I worked on a few like memoirs like that. I worked on another one, Single Mom by Choice, which is by this mother in Texas and about her journey to be a mother. In her case, she chose to be a single mother, and she was also just straight to self-publishing. She didn't even, I don't think it was even on her radar to try to get it published traditionally. And I think in recent years, nowadays, you have so many options to just get the book out there yourself. If you're managed, the project management aspect of it, and just figure it out.
And I think with memoirs too, it's probably a little easier to self-publish because traditional publishers, unless you have a big platform or a celebrity or something, they're probably not going to be as interested in a memoir unless there's something really unique. Actually, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about, because what I like to tell people that are writing that type of book, so a memoir or a story of their life, is that what is that sort of significant story question even in a memoir? Like, what if you could say this book tells about, what is it about? And we had spoken about Educated, which I loved. Me
too.
And it's a story about her being educated, but it's also more than that. It's a story about being able to get out of this very abusive and poverty-stricken life that she lived in as a child, and actually succeed and go to college and become educated, not only educated as far as academically, but also educated about the world. She was very uh,
Shelter.
yeah, very, very
Yes.
sheltered.
Yes.
So yeah, if you're writing that type of book, like what advice would you give a writer that wants to write a memoir, and how to make it, I guess, more readable to more people?
Well, I would say hire an editor for sure. Workshop it. I mean, there are many. I would encourage writers to join writers groups where you critique each other's work or get kind of
Yeah,
free advice too. So you
yeah,
don't necessarily have to spend $5,000 to get a developmental edit. Um,
right, right.
and yeah, I would definitely encourage hooking up with other writers that might be able to help you. You could get a coach, and uh, and I would definitely encourage writers to explore self-publishing too, particularly with memoir, because it's an extremely crowded shelf. It's very competitive, and if you haven't published anything before, then it's really competitive because you're competing with many very polished, very experienced published writers who have also had interesting lives. And
Right, right. Yeah, yeah,
so that, I mean, that's the consideration that you might not be able to see, but having been,
right.
an editor on the other side of the desk, getting all of these submissions, you're
Yeah,
competing
yeah,
with a lot of top flight published writers who have worked on their craft for years and years.
right.
Um, but I've seen with the memoir, self-published memoirs that I've worked on, particularly over the past year, it's like there's nothing wrong with saying I have a great story. I don't know if Penguin is going to publish it, but I'm going to publish it, and I think people will like it. And you can do that very easily now.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. That's good. Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons I think too for publishing your story, because your own family members or just friends, or you might be able to help just a small group of people if you've gone through something that and survived, right? That might help somebody. It could be small groups. It doesn't have to be, you know, just millions of people. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's always worthwhile writing, I think, your story down.
And I worked on another book that reminds me, another memoir that I edited like 6 months ago, "The Girl in the Wheelchair" by Gillian Clare Morrow, which I would also, and that's a memoir of her disability when she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when she was about 20, in her early 20s. Devastating. And
Yeah,
she just wrote her story. How did she deal with that? She'd been very athletic, and over several years came to terms with it and learned how to play tennis
yeah.
again. And now she's competing,
Wow,
playing
wow.
tennis in a wheelchair. There's like a
Yeah,
international league for that. And
that's awesome.
really inspiring. Would a
Right. Yeah.
publisher have wanted to publish that? You know what? I don't know. There are a lot of disability memoirs already out there. I don't know if this would have found a spot, but she just went for it. And from her hiring me to edit it to being published was about 2 months time. And
Wow. Mhm.
but in contrast, if you want to go the traditional route, you finished your manuscript, then you want to get an agent. You do not want to submit it yourself to publishers. So that's going to take, a
Wow.
month or two just to do the research, and then to send it out, maybe take 6 months or so. It could take a long time just to get an agent, and then they need to submit it, and that could take another 6 months. And then if you do get a deal, then the book will be published. Publishers' calendars are filled up for about 18 months usually. So then 18 months after that, so you're looking at least 3 years,
Yeah.
more or less.
Right, right,
Once
right,
you decide, yes, I'm going to write a book and publish it. Well, if you want to go the traditional route, it's going to take, best case scenario, a couple of years.
right.
And you're not necessarily going to make a lot of, I don't want to be doom and gloom, but just realistically, as a first time author, you're not going to get a big advance, and they're going to have all the
Right,
rights to your book like forever.
right.
So there are just some, now that I've just seen both sides of the fence, there are some real upsides to, particularly if you're writing a memoir that might be a bit of a hard sell to a publisher, just because memoirs are very tough. Um,
Yes.
no matter how interesting the story is. there are some real upsides to just taking control of it. And, you know, I'm just going to go straight to market with this, and
Right.
you know, do the research. There are self-publishing associations that you can network with other authors and learn, benefit from their experience. And I would definitely advise would-be writers to do that too, like join other groups, even if it's $100 a year to join some association. Like those kind of networking opportunities can be really helpful to get advice from other writers that have already done this path, and you can really learn from them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah. And it's, you know, this is your business now, so you want to invest a little bit in organizations and editors and all that to make to have the best book possible.
And it's a
And then the book,
write-off.
yeah, yeah.
Things off.
That's true. No, and the book that you just mentioned, as you were talking about it, I was thinking, you know, that she doesn't have to sell 1 million copies of that book. I could see her going to, you know, I've been in education too my whole life, going to schools or colleges and just doing small presentations and taking her book about how she went through that, and now she's playing tennis in a wheelchair, and she's gone on with her life. And I think
Right.
that would be inspiring, and be inspiring to high school kids or anybody who, you know, everybody has some issue. It might not be something physical that you can see, but there'd be other problems that you know, young teens have. And I think that would be
Absolutely.
fantastic. Hopefully she's doing something like that, because I think that, so
I
it's
think
great.
she is. I think that's part of the reason that she wanted to have the book out there.
Yeah, yeah, that's
It's
great.
part of your platform if you're a
Right.
public speaker in any way. Or, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let me see. I think I had one more question here. Yeah, how does how does I think one of the problems with finding an editor is, and it's one of the reasons that I am doing this as well, is just to kind of expose people to, you know, who are agents and editors and how to find ones that you can trust. But if you have never done that, like, how do you choose the best editor for your project?
That's a very subjective question.
Well, I
It's
guess
hard to
how do you do the research for, you know, finding an editor?
Google. I would just
Google?
Google it. Yes. Many editors have websites if this is what they do. I'm
Okay.
still working on that, but I can.
Well, is there something, I guess, is there something that you should look for, like for you, right? Like they could look and see your history and see, wow, well, she worked for, you know, major publishers. She's had her own literary, she's been in this a long time. So I probably have faith compared to somebody who could still be an amazing editor, but maybe has just started out.
You know, if they have references or endorsements or
Okay.
testimonials, like I have many testimonials from
Yeah.
writers that have worked with me, so that's helpful. And that's
Okay.
something you can just see what have they worked on before. And
Okay.
usually they'll have some kind of testimonial from writers, and then talk to them first. You know,
Okay.
talk to a couple at least through email or on the phone, and
Okay.
just see what kind of a feel you get. Does this feel like they don't have to be your best friend, but are you comfortable with how they're responding to you? Are they responding in a timely manner? Do they get back to you at all? You know, cross one off the list if they don't answer you at all. You know, it's just like anything else. You want to someone you're going to hire. You want to just interview them, do your due diligence, and see if they have the right track record, and if you have a good feeling about them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, great. That's fantastic. Okay, so is there anything else or any other advice you would like to give new writers? Write good books.
You cut out there for a second, actually.
Oh no, I was just making it. I was just saying, write good books.
Right. Just persevere, stick to a schedule. I think persistence is key, and persistence and consistence, you know, writing a little bit every day.
Yeah, yeah.
And writing can be very isolating, but I recommend reaching out to other writers,
Yeah.
and trying to get some contacts, a writer's group, and yeah, don't be shy about getting your story out there one way or the other. Publish on Medium or some other platforms. You can get your name out there that way also, like smaller pieces. I think that's important.
I think so too. Yeah, getting out there and not waiting until that big book is published before
Right,
you
exactly.
start getting your website and getting your yeah, publishing wherever you can. So
And you can, if depending on what kind of book you have, you could publish an excerpt or adapt a chapter or something as a standalone piece. And
yeah,
then that can also be a way to get a little bit of feedback about how it's going to be received. And you might tweak it a little bit based on the feedback you get, the
right.
larger book.
Okay, fantastic. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Diane. It was really, really wonderful seeing you again and
Me
chatting.
too. This has been
And
great.
yeah, yeah. So if you are looking for an editor, I highly, highly obviously recommend Diane. I will be
Thank you. That's
posting,
very
I'll
sweet.
be posting her contact information. One more question, I guess. When they're contacting you, is there anything in particular that they should say, or is it just something about their project?
um, yes, just a description
What
of
they're
the project and what you're looking for. Mhm.
Okay, okay, fantastic. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.